A quiet rancher offers refuge to a woman with a broken past, but when her enemies come seeking vengeance, neither of them is prepared for the battle that follows. As danger closes in, the lines between protector and prey blur. Eliza Granger received the letter on a cold evening, wrapped in a worn scrap of linen and stained by time. The handwriting was stiff, uneven, written by someone not used to asking for anything. It came from a man named Matthew Klein, out in a forgotten corner of the Wyoming Territory, called Devil's Throat. The words inside were simple and raw, not dressed up with romance or empty promises. I have land. I am alone. I will not hurt you. I've seen what men can do. I want peace. If you do too, write back. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less. Eliza sat in the dim light of a flickering lantern, her fingers trembling as she read it. She wasn't sure why this letter touched something deep inside her, something she thought had long gone silent. Maybe it was because he didn't ask for her beauty, her youth, or even her love. He asked only that she come, and in return, he would offer warmth and no violence. That was more than she'd ever been given. Eliza had seen cruelty up close. Her ribs still clicked wrong when she breathed too deep. There was a small hollow behind her ear, where a piece of flesh had once been. Her front tooth was gone, knocked loose by a shove down the stairs from a man who claimed to care for her. She hadn't always been this way, but years of hard men and harder choices had carved away everything soft. Her pride had no room to grow. She didn't carry her survival like a badge. It simply was. It hung on her like worn clothes. The place she stayed in now, a run-down boarding house, was barely more than shelter. The woman who let her stay, Margaret, was coughing herself to death, and Eliza had no plan for what came next. She did laundry for bed and board and silence. She hadn't imagined leaving, but the walls were crumbling, the money gone, and soon there would be nothing left to scrub clean. She didn't reply to the letter at first. She folded it neatly and slid it under a loose floorboard beside her cot. It stayed there quiet as a breath held too long, until Margaret began coughing blood. That night, by the dull glow of a street lamp, Eliza wrote her response on butcher paper, with a pencil that barely held lead. I am not pretty, and I am not young, she began, but I can work. I can sew. I can fix a horse's leg in the middle of a storm. I won't be hit again. If you lie, I'll leave. If you drink, I won't come. I have nothing left but my name, and I mean to keep it. If you still want me, I'll be on the 4th train in May. She sent no photograph. She had none to give. The days passed slowly after that, brittle like the pages of a book that no one wanted to finish. When Margaret died, Eliza said nothing over the coughing. She just helped the undertaker lower the body with 2 strangers, and went back to scrubbing blood from the wall. The train ride west was rough and long. 4 women packed into a freight car like leftover supplies. One girl was 16, and already pregnant. Another was running from the law. Eliza didn't ask their stories. She kept her coat buttoned and her bag closed. The farther west they went, the more the towns blurred into dust and grey sky, until finally the conductor called out, "Devil's Throat." Eliza stepped off the train into a wind that felt like it came from the edge of the world. The platform was empty. Then she saw him. Matthew Klein was taller than she expected, his skin browned from the sun, his hands like coiled rope. He said nothing but, "You made it," and tipped his hat. No smile, no questions, just a solid, quiet presence, like a tree that had weathered too many storms to fall for one more. The ride to his ranch was silent, except for the creak of the wagon and the whine of wind slipping through the boards. His land stretched wide and raw, a cracked open place with leaning fences, and a barn half sunk into itself. The house was made of wood and stone and stubbornness. It stood like a wounded man refusing to drop. Inside it was sparse. 1 table, 2 chairs, a Bible and a single folded blanket. He showed her to a small room that could be hers. It was clean. That mattered more than anything else. She didn't unpack her hopes, just her sewing kit, and a change of clothes. That first night they didn't speak. She didn't even take off her boots. In the days that followed, she cleaned the house, stitched curtains, patched holes in the roof, and boiled well water twice before she drank it. Matthew worked the land in silence, only ever talking to his horses or the thin black dog, Jonah, who didn't wag his tail for anyone but him. One afternoon, Eliza found a bottle hidden under his bed. Her breath caught. The label was gone, but she knew what it meant. She said nothing. The next day it was gone. She never saw it again. Slowly she learned Matthew like you learn a song by ear. He had a scar that ran down his left arm, deep and ugly. He never explained it. At night he lit a candle between their rooms, but never crossed the hall. A month passed before she asked him, "Why did you send for me?" He looked up from where he was mending a fence. His answer was simple, "Because I was alone. I know what that does to a man." She didn't press. She understood more than he could guess. Still some part of her stayed knotted inside, waiting for footsteps at night, for a hand too fast, for promises shattered like glass. She locked her door and braced it with a chair. Matthew never asked why. He just waited. In that waiting, something quiet grew between them, a kind of trust, not born of words, but from what was left unsaid. Then came the gunshot, sharp and wrong against the silence of the hills. Eliza dropped the bucket she was carrying, and saw Matthew already moving, rifle in hand, his face darkening like a storm cloud. Jonah dropped low to the ground. Matthew didn't yell, he just looked at her, and she understood. "Go inside, stay low," she obeyed. From behind the kitchen window she watched him move like a man who had seen violence, and learned how to carry it without breaking. She lit a lamp low, and laid a hunting knife beside a tin of flour. Her hands didn't shake. She hated that they did. Matthew returned alone, but something about him had changed. He said it wasn't meant for them. Maybe poachers, maybe just strangers passing through, but she didn't believe it. Neither did he. The next day she found tracks, 3 sets of boot prints near the edge of their land, wide, heavy, not friendly. Matthew knelt beside them, frowning. "I don't know them," he said, "but I don't like the way they walk. Men like this are used to hurting something." That night he sat on the porch with his rifle. She brought him coffee, didn't speak. After a long silence, he told her about the man he killed. After the war, not during. "I used to be like them," he said, angry, drunk, looking to break something just to feel alive. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "I think I understand." And in that moment, something shifted. Not romance, something stronger, something real. She realized she wasn't afraid of the shot. She was afraid of what might come next, and what she might have to do to stop it. Devil's Throat was not a town built for comfort. It was a jagged edge of land shaped by wind, drought, and the quiet anger of isolation. It stretched far and wide with no softness, no welcome signs, and no easy living. When Eliza Granger arrived, it felt less like stepping into a new life, and more like standing at the edge of the world. The platform was empty when she stepped off the train, her boots hitting the cracked wood with a thud that echoed louder than it should have. She waited for someone to meet her, uncertain if Matthew Clean would really be there. Then she saw him, a tall, sun-worn man, with hands like old rope, and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of empty years. He said only, "You made it," and tipped his hat. No smile, no warm greeting, just that like the land itself speaking through him. They rode in silence, the wagon creaking as they passed twisted trees, broken fences, and long stretches of raw open land. His ranch was a skeleton of a homestead. The barn leaned like a tired drunk, half its roof caved in, and the fields were dust-choked and stubborn. The house stood with one side patched in stone and the other in graying planks, like two strangers forced to hold each other up. Eliza didn't expect warmth, and she wasn't offered it. She stepped inside and saw how much this place needed fixing. One table, one stove, 2 chairs, no photographs, no softness, just necessity. A thin black dog stood by the doorway, his gaze full of tension. Matthew called him Jonah. That was all he said. Jonah didn't growl, but he didn't wag his tail either. The room Matthew offered her was small, just big enough for a cot and a hook on the wall. She unpacked nothing sentimental, just her sewing kit and her change of clothes. She took her boots off, but kept them by the bed. That first night, the house groaned in the wind like it was remembering every storm it had survived. Eliza lay stiff on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that never came. No footsteps in the hall, no angry voices, no doors slammed in rage, just silence. And somehow that was stranger than the noise she was used to. The next morning, she was up before the sun. She didn't ask where anything was. She found the water pump, boiled what she could, and started cleaning. The windows were layered in grime, the stove hadn't been scrubbed in years, and dust lay thick as ash on every surface. She cleaned until her back ached, then started sewing, curtains first, hand-stitched, because if she was going to look out into the hard world, she wanted a soft frame to do it through. Matthew didn't stop her. He didn't ask what she was doing or what. He worked the land outside, mending fences with quiet purpose, hammering boards into place, without once asking for help or offering comment. Jonah followed him everywhere, still unsure of her. Days passed like water dripping slowly from a cracked pipe, quiet, steady, without rush. Eliza found the root cellar, took inventory of what little food was stored, and began making lists in her head. She boiled the well water twice. She patched holes in the roof using canvas from old grain sacks. She even fixed the hinges on the front door, which creaked like a dying animal every time it opened. All the while Matthew said nothing, and in that silence, something strange began to happen. Eliza started to feel not safe. Exactly, but not endangered either. It was a new kind of quiet, not the kind you get before someone shouts, but the kind that grows between two people who both know the value of leaving each other alone. At night he left a candle burning between their rooms, not for romance, not for comfort, but maybe just so the darkness didn't swallow them whole. Eliza didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't cruel. He wasn't trying to win her over. He just was. There were moments when she caught him staring, not with hunger or judgment, but as if trying to learn her by observation alone. Once she found a broken chair on the porch, and began repairing it with spare nails. He passed by without a word, then returned minutes later with sandpaper, and handed it to her. Still no words, just quiet help. Another day she tried lifting a sack of grain from the wagon and it slipped from her arm. Matthew reached out, caught it with one hand, and placed it back in the wagon without comment. She waited for him to say something about her strength or her clumsiness. He didn't. He just walked away, leaving her dignity intact. It was those little things that started to matter. The absence of insult, the patience, the space. He spoke to his horses more than he spoke to her, and yet somehow, that made his silences easier to bear. One day she asked him about the land, why he stayed, why he worked it so hard when it clearly didn't give much back. He shrugged and said, "It's what I've got," and that was that. No long speech, no poetry, just truth in its plainest form. Eliza respected that. She had spent too long around men who talked themselves into meaning, who wrapped cruelty in promises, and called it care. Matthew didn't talk. He acted. He worked. He let her be. Sometimes she caught herself watching him work, how he handled the horses, how he repaired a broken fence, how he spoke gently to Jonah when the dog got spooked by thunder. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was something else, a deep, wary curiosity, a question that hadn't yet formed. One morning, she found a single red flower left on the kitchen table, just one, in an old tin cup. No note, no explanation. When she glanced at Matthew, he was already outside, hammering a new board into the barn. She didn't ask, she just moved the cup to the windowsill. That was the moment she realized she'd stopped counting the days. She no longer thought about where she came from, or who might be looking for her. The weight of her past hadn't vanished, but it had quieted. In this strange, silent place with its broken wood and stubborn wind, she was beginning to exist again, not just survive. She still locked her door at night, still kept her boots close, and the chair wedged under the handle, but she slept, really slept. And when she woke up, It wasn't with dread in her chest. It was with purpose in her hands. This was not love. This was not healing. Not yet. It was something older than both. It was the beginning of becoming whole. It was the kind of peace that doesn't come easy and doesn't shout when it arrives. It just settles into your bones and tells you, for now you are okay. You are not hunted. You are not hurt. You are here, and here is enough. One night, as the sun dropped behind the hills, and the wind cooled to a whisper, a sound shattered the quiet life Eliza and Matthew had started to build. Gunfire, sharp and sudden, echoing through the canyons like a memory that refused to stay buried. Eliza was hauling a bucket of water from the well when the shot rang out and instinct took over. She froze, heart pounding, fingers clenching the handle so tight, her knuckles turned white. Her eyes met Matthew's across the yard, and in that glance, she saw no panic. Only focus, the quiet control of a man who had heard that sound too many times, and knew exactly what it meant. He didn't raise his voice or waste time with questions. He simply said, "Inside, stay low," and she obeyed. Inside, she crouched by the window, pulling the curtains just wide enough to watch as Matthew moved toward the barn, rifle in hand, each step measured, every movement efficient. He was calm, but there was something in the set of his shoulders, a heaviness that suggested this wasn't just about a random shot in the night. Eliza stayed down, the hunting knife placed beside the lamp on the kitchen table, her breathing shallow but steady. She watched as Matthew disappeared into the barn and returned a few minutes later, eyes scanning the horizon. He said only, "Not for us, but close. Too close." She nodded, but both of them knew that wasn't the end of it. The land might be wide, but it held on to echoes, and this one didn't feel like it came from a stranger passing through. The next day they found the boot prints, 3 sets, wide-spaced and fresh, not belonging to anyone they knew. Matthew squatted beside them and ran his fingers through the dirt like he was reading a book. Only he could understand. "They don't walk like ranch hands," he muttered. "They walk like men used to hunting some." Eliza felt the old tension return, the one that tightened her spine and curled into her gut. She didn't say anything, just helped him check the perimeter, every step a reminder that safety was always temporary. That night, Matthew sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, facing the hills like he was waiting for ghosts. Eliza brought him coffee, the metal cup warm between her hands, and handed it to him without a word. He took it, sipped once, and let silence stretch out between them like a second kind of conversation. After a long while he spoke, his voice low, barely rising above the sound of the wind. "There was a time I wasn't much better than them," he said. "Not with women," he added quickly, "but angry, drunk, reckless. The war took pieces of me I didn't know I had, and when I came back, I didn't know how to be anything else." Eliza didn't flinch, she didn't offer pity or comfort, she just listened, and that seemed to be enough. He looked at her, the lines around his eyes etched deeper in the lantern light. "I killed a man once," he said, "not in battle after. I don't even remember his name, just that he was loud, mean. I was tired." She didn't ask for more. Instead she said, "I think I understand." And she did, not the details, but the weight of carrying something dark you can't put down. In that quiet, they both seemed to settle, not into peace, but into mutual recognition. They didn't speak of the tracks again, but both of them started watching the hills a little closer. Jonah, the dog, didn't leave Matthew's side for days. The wind changed direction, the air grew sharper, and still nothing happened. No more shots, no strangers on horseback, no messages carved into fence posts. But the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like the pause before a door creaks open in the dark. Then, while hanging laundry one morning, Eliza spotted something strange at the edge of the field. More tracks, deeper this time, circling back and forth like someone pacing. She called Matthew and together they followed the trail to the woods. He knelt again, touched the earth and frowned. "Same boots," he said, "but more pressure in the step. They're getting close." That evening, he set up traps along the northern ridge, trip lines, tied to bells, rocks stacked just so to collapse when kicked. Eliza cleaned the rifle, her hands steady, her eyes distant. Later that night, they sat in the kitchen without touching their food. She finally asked, "Do you think they're after me?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think you know the answer already." She did. The past had a long reach, and maybe it had finally found her. She told him the truth then, about Missouri, the man she left, the lies he told after she ran. He said, "I stole from him," she said. Said, "I took what was his. I only took myself." Matthew reached across the table and took her hand. Not gently, but firmly, like anchoring her to the moment. "Then he's the thief," he said. It was the first time she truly believed a man when he said he would protect her. The next day, Matthew buried a second rifle behind the Eliza practiced shooting until her wrist ached. They laid out escape routes, drew maps in the dirt, and planned where to meet if things went bad. They didn't talk about fear, they prepared like soldiers. And yet, as the days passed, and the shadows stretched longer each evening, Eliza felt something shift inside her. This was no longer just about survival, it was about claiming a life they had barely begun to live. She wasn't just defending herself, she was defending the right to exist in a world that had tried to erase her more than once. One night she sat beside Matthew on the porch again, her boots resting on the rail, her eyes scanning the hills. "Do you think they'll come?" she asked. He didn't turn to her. "They're already here," he said. She knew he was right. The quiet wouldn't last. But for the first time, the fear didn't feel like it owned her. She still locked the door, still kept the knife near her bed, but now she had something more than just weapon. She had purpose. She had someone who didn't try to shape her into silence, but instead stood beside her, just as battered and just as determined. The night air was cool, and the stars blinked above them like a promise that no matter what came, they were not alone anymore. She leaned back in her chair, rifle beside her, and waited. Whatever came next, she would face it on her feet. The night was quiet in that unsettling way that makes your skin feel too tight. Like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to go wrong, and then it did. Eliza had just blown out the lamp, when the sky lit up orange through the thin curtains. The smell hit first: burning hay, scorched wood, and smoke thick enough to crawl into your lungs. She didn't scream, she didn't pause. She grabbed the rifle from beside the stove, and was on the porch in seconds, heart pounding but hands steady. Outside, the barn was already a torch against the dark flames, climbing fast and wild. The horses inside shrieked, panicked. She could hear the bucking of hooves against walls that would not hold for long. Matthew was already there, barefoot and shirtless, a silhouette of movement, as he tore open the barn doors and vanished into the smoke. Jonah, the dog, barked sharp and low before diving into the haze behind him. Eliza turned her focus to the hills. That's when she saw them. 3 figures, barely shadows, 2 on horseback, and 1 on foot, standing at the ridgeline like spectators at a hanging. One of them laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that cracked across the field like a whip. Another raised a lantern, illuminating his face just enough for Eliza to see the grin. Her blood turned to fire. She didn't wait to be sure who they were. She didn't shout a warning. She aimed and fired, the recoil slamming into her shoulder as the man on foot dove behind a tree. The others reacted fast. One rider lost control, thrown off his horse and hitting the dirt hard, the sound of his body folding into the ground sickening and sudden. The second rider pulled a pistol and fired wildly toward the house, bullets punching into the side wall, one smashing through the porch railing just feet from where Eliza stood. She didn't flinch. She reloaded. Another shot echoed through the hills, but it wasn't her. Matthew had returned from the smoke, dragging one horse by the reins, the other limping close behind. Both animals were shaking, their hides slick with sweat and fear. Jonah circled them, his bark's horse now almost a growl. Eliza caught sight of the third man again, the older one with the beard and flat-brimmed hat, raising his rifle, aiming not at her, but at Matthew's back. Time slowed. The fire hissed behind her. Her finger squeezed. The sound that followed was not like the first. It was cleaner, crueler. The man dropped his weapon and slumped to the ground. He didn't move again. Everything stopped for a breath. The night seemed to pause with her. The third man ran, disappearing over the hill, leaving one dead and one groaning in the dirt. The fire had eaten most of the barn by the sky above was black and red, flickering with ash. The wind had shifted and pushed the flames west, away from the house, but not before they left their mark. The fence was gone, the hay was gone, the field smoked like a battlefield after the cannons slid. Matthew walked toward her through the chaos, soot covering his chest, eyes locked on the hills. He didn't speak, neither did she. Inside, the house was filled with the smell of smoke and the weight of what had just happened. Eliza set the rifle down on the table and looked at her hands, black and blistered, but not shaking. She had killed a man, not in defense of others, not in a moment of panicked survival, but because she'd chosen to. Because she refused to lose what little she'd built. There was no regret, only breath in her lungs and a silence between them, heavy with understanding. Matthew poured water into a tin cup and passed it to her, but neither drank. The fire burned out slowly, the barn collapsing into itself with a groan like an old man dying in his sleep. They sat at the table until dawn bled into the sky, saying nothing. When the sun finally rose, it touched the land gently, like it didn't yet know what had happened. Matthew buried the dead man with no words. There was no sermon, no prayer. He just dug the hole, rolled the body in, and covered it with earth. Eliza watched from the porch. The hat had blown off the man's head and kept tumbling in the wind, so Matthew took it and nailed it to a post by the gate, not out of spite, but practicality, a warning written in silence. Eliza stared at the scorched earth, the black skeleton of the barn and the bullet hole in the porch post. She wanted to cry but didn't. Instead, she walked to the ruined edge of the barn and sifted through the ash. She found one unburned horseshoe and carried it inside, placing it on the mantel like a shield. They didn't talk about what happened that night. They didn't need to, but something had changed in her. The woman who stepped off the train with nothing but a sewing kit and a letter was gone. What remained was harder, sharper, quieter, not broken-shaped, forged like metal in a fire she didn't ask for. She wasn't a wife, she wasn't a widow, she was something else entirely, something neither of them had words for yet. The next morning they repaired the fence. She worked beside Matthew, driving nails into new boards, tying ropes into knots with calloused fingers. Every step forward was an act of defiance. They rebuilt the gate together, side by side, the silence between them no longer empty, but full of what had been faced and survived. Eliza didn't tell him thank you and he didn't ask how she was. They both knew that wasn't what either of them needed. What they needed was to keep going, and that's what they did. Later that day she cleaned the rifle, oiled the barrel, and loaded it again. She placed it by the door, read, just in case. When night came, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. She didn't take off her boots, but she didn't lock the door either. Matthew sat beside the fire, his shirt still streaked with soot, his eyes still on the horizon. Eliza sat beside him. Neither of them spoke of the man she had killed. Neither spoke of the ones who had fled. They sat there until the fire turned to coals and the world outside the windows turned black again. But this time, she didn't feel small in the dark. She felt like the dark would think twice before reaching for her again. And when she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed not of running, but of standing her ground. The letter was nailed to a splintered wooden stake, just beyond the well, flapping in the wind like a flag of warning, its message written in thick, crude ink, and pinned in place with a dead weight, a hawk's body, wings stiff, feathers matted with blood. "She's ours," it said. "We'll come to collect." There was no signature, only a mark, a jagged spade drawn over the outline of a man's chest. Eliza read the note out loud while Matthew stood beside her, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the ridge where the trees gathered like secrets. She held the paper in her hands for a long time before Matthew took it, crumpled it without a word, and tossed it into the fire pit. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay on top of the quilt she'd stitched by lantern light, eyes open to the ceiling, heart racing not with fear but with a sharp readiness she hadn't known years ago. The warning wasn't just a threat, it was a reminder that her past had teeth, and it was still gnawing at her heel. She rose quietly, feet bare against the cold wooden floor, and stepped outside. Matthew was by the fence line, his hands wrapped in cloth, knuckles raw from hammering posts. He didn't turn when she approached. The stars above them blinked in silence, as if watching from too far away to help. "You don't have to protect me," she said, her voice soft but certain. He turned then, eyes meeting hers with a weight that said he understood more than he could explain. I'm not, he replied. I'm standing beside you. She nodded, and for the first time she didn't feel like something to be shielded. She felt like a partner. The next morning, Matthew saddled his horse and packed a small bag, ammunition, food, a folded map. He told her he had a name to chase, a lead that might give them an edge. I won't be long, he said. And Eliza didn't ask for more. She watched him ride off, dust curling behind him like smoke, and then she turned to the house. Her house now, whether or not she'd claimed it out loud. Alone didn't feel like weakness anymore. It felt like something sharp she could carry in her hand. She walked the perimeter, checked every trap Matthew had set, reinforced the doors and windows with rope and nails. Then she sat on the porch and waited, the rifle across her lap, her fingers wrapped around the stock like it was part of her. The next day, just as the sun tipped past noon, she saw smoke in the trees east of the ridge. Not a wildfire, something smaller, slower, a campfire. Her blood went still. She filled her pockets with bullets, whistled once for Jonah, and headed into the woods, moving silent through the underbrush. Half a mile out she spotted them, 2 boys barely older than 16, one crouched over a rabbit skin, the other with a rifle resting loose across his knees. Their coats were too big, their boots too worn. They weren't killers, not yet, but they'd been sent to see what she would do. She stayed hidden and listened. She'll come, said the skinny one, his voice scratchy from windburn. Boss says she's soft. All women are. The other boys spat in the dirt. You sure this is even the right place? Yeah, said she had a scar behind her ear. Boss, don't forget face it. Eliza stepped out from the trees before she had time to change her mind. Rifle raised, feet planted firm. The boys froze. One reached for something at his belt, and she fired once. Warning shot. Dirt kicked up inches from his boot. Next one isn't a warning, she said. You walk west until your boots fall apart. If I see you again, you won't get a second chance. The boy dropped the knife. The other one started crying, quiet and slow, like he didn't even realize he was doing it, just tears leaking from something cracked open. Eliza didn't move. She held her ground until they ran. When they disappeared into the trees, she looked down at the rabbit skin and frowned. She picked it up and buried it with her hands, muttering a quiet apology to a life wasted. That night she sat by the window with the lamp turned low. The rifle was still within reach. Jonah lay beside her, his ears twitching at every creak. When Matthew returned the next morning, dust-caked and bruised, he said little. A bullet had grazed his shoulder. In his coat, he carried half a torn bounty poster and blood-stained paper. The man you shot had brothers, he said, 5 of them. They call themselves the KD Gang, outlaws, slavers. Worse, he had found one of them drunk in a saloon and left him broken in a pig pen. There'll be more, he added. She didn't flinch. Let them come. That night she kissed him for the first time, not gently, not like a dream, but like a woman who'd walked through fire and found someone still standing beside her when the smoke cleared. In the days that followed, they prepared not like farmers, but like soldiers. They fortified the house, sealed the windows, reinforced the barn. Eliza practiced with both hands. Matthew dug trenches. They spoke little, but every nail hammered, every stone moved was a promise, not of love, but of survival. A week later, another message came, this time, scrawled in charcoal on a piece of canvas, nailed to the gate. More of us than bullets in your house. Should have let her go. Eliza burned the message without reading it aloud. That night she stood at the fence again. I won't run, she said. Matthew looked at her, eyes clear. Good. I wasn't planning to, either. And that was it. No speeches, no vows, just 2 people who refused to be moved. The night they came back was colder than usual, with the wind sharp and full of warning, dragging across the porch, like it was searching for something to sink its claws into. Eliza had been watching the tree line for days, knowing it was only a matter of time. The gang didn't sneak. They wanted to be seen, to be feared. 5 men rode in under moonlight, their torches lighting the night like stars that had caught fire. Guns strapped loose and easy to their hips, mouths twisted into the kind of grins only cruel men wore. They didn't come quietly. The first man tripped a wire near the eastern field and screamed when the stake punched through his thigh, dragging him down into a ditch half dug for just that reason. The other 4 kept moving, splitting apart, like wolves, circling wounded prey. Matthew fired from the root cellar, his position hidden beneath crates and boards, picking off one man who tried to crawl through the vegetable patch. Eliza stayed inside the house, guarding the west window, where the boards were weakest. Jonah, though limping from the last encounter, ran room to room, growling low, his fur bristling with instinct. One torch hit the porch, fire licking up the wooden frame like it had been waiting all its life to consume it. Eliza didn't waste time. She shot the man who threw it in the chest, watched his body jerk back and fall silent. Then the window shattered beside her, glass slicing a shallow cut down her cheek. She didn't flinch. Her heart pounded, but her grip was steady. Then came the crash, wood splintering as the back door exploded inward, and with it, the nightmare walked in wearing boots she remembered. He was bigger than she remembered, thicker in the shoulders, a spade tattoo inked into the skin of his neck like a brow. His face was older, but the smile was the same, the one that told her he still thought she belonged to him. "I told you I'd come," he said, stepping inside like it was his house, like it was still his right. She raised the rifle, but he was fast. The butt of his shotgun cracked against her arm and sent the gun skidding across the floor. Her shoulder screamed in pain, but she stayed standing. He reached for her, grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard enough to make her bones grind. "You are mine," he said. "You'll always be mine." She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She slammed her forehead into his nose, felt the crunch, saw the surprise flicker in his eyes as blood streamed down his face. He staggered, just enough for her to reach the stove. The knife was gone. She hadn't had time to grab it, but the cast iron pan was still there, still hot. She grabbed it and swung. It hit his jaw with a sickening crack, dropping him to one knee. She didn't stop. She drove the edge of the pan into his temple once, twice, a third time until his body stopped moving. He gasped, "You," but she didn't let him finish. She hit him again, harder, until there was nothing left to say. The room went silent, except for her breath, jagged and fast, like the last air of a drowning woman who had finally kicked to the surface. She stood there covered in blood, chest heaving, the pan heavy in her hand. When Matthew burst through the front door, gun raised, eyes wild, the fight was already over. Eliza didn't look at him. She looked at the floor where the man lay, lifeless, face unrecognizable. She placed the pan down, walked to the water basin, and began washing her hands. The fire outside still glowed, but it no longer threatened. 2 other men were dead, one near the fence line, another near the porch, his torch smothered in the dirt. The 5th had run, dragging the wounded one with him, their horses kicking up a trail toward the hills. Matthew didn't speak. He stepped over the body, checked the windows, then walked back outside to deal with the rest. That night, they didn't talk. There was nothing left to say. They dragged the bodies to the edge of the field, poured lamp oil over the corpses, and lit them with the same fire that had tried to destroy them. There were no crosses, no words spoken, just flames, and the howl of coyotes in the distance. Jonah sat beside Eliza, his head against her leg, breathing slow. Inside she scrubbed the blood from the floor, then her arms, then her hair. It took hours, and it never felt like enough. The boards still held stains, her skin still smelled like iron and fire. When she was done, she walked out onto the porch, barefoot, the cold wood grounding her. Matthew sat beside her, holding a cup of water. Neither of them would drink. He looked at her, not with pity or fear, but with a kind of solemn respect. "You did what I couldn't," he said finally. "I did what had to be done," she replied. They watched the stars rise and waited for the wind to blow away the smoke. In the morning, they buried the pan behind the barn. It wasn't superstition, it was a line drawn. This tool had become something else. Inside the house, it was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. Not yet. The fear had faded, replaced by something colder, clarity. Eliza walked the perimeter with a rifle strapped across her back. She reset the traps, fixed the back door, and didn't flinch when she passed the blood-soaked dirt. That evening, she stitched her own wound with a needle and thread, gritting her teeth through the pain. She didn't ask for help. Matthew watched but didn't offer, not because he didn't care, but because he knew she needed to do it herself. She wasn't someone you say, she was someone you stood beside. Days passed. They rebuilt the porch stronger, added more stone to the outer walls. The house looked less like a home, and more like a place that refused to fall. Eliza carried herself differently. She had always been quiet, always been sharp, but now there was something in her walk, something final. She was not afraid of the dark anymore, not because it was gone, but because she'd learned to stare it down and make it retreat. She cleaned the rifle twice a day, lined the windows with broken glass, and tied bells to the fence posts, so she would always know if something or someone was coming. The KD gang had lost their worst that night, and the others hadn't come back, not yet, but she knew better than to believe it was over. They were vultures, and they would return if they thought the bones had cooled, but they wouldn't find her the same. The woman who had arrived with a suitcase and a scar had become something else entirely. She was not prey, she was not a victim, she was not someone to run. She had taken her past and burned it into the ground, and when she walked the edge of the property, wind in her hair, blood still under her fingernails, she knew exactly who she was. She was Eliza Granger, and this time, no one was coming to take her. The days after the final fire were quieter, but they weren't peaceful in the way peace is usually imagined. There were no soft mornings of forgetting, no gentle evenings where the past stayed buried. What Eliza and Matthew found in those days wasn't peace. It was something rougher, something earned. They rebuilt, but not to make things pretty. They built for strength. The porch was reinforced with thick beams. The barn was framed in stone at its base, and the back door had 2 locks and a metal bar that slid into place with a heavy click. They lined the windows with thick glass salvaged from a nearby wrecked railcar. Matthew widened the clearing around the house and planted thorn bushes along the edges. Eliza stitched a new quilt by the firelight, not with patterns of flowers, but with sharp, angular shapes, the kind that looked like broken glass, but held warmth between the seams. They didn't speak often of what had happened. Some things didn't need to be shared aloud when they had already been carved into the walls, stitched into the bedding, buried in the dirt behind the barn. Or afternoon, while sorting through old coats in the corner chest, Eliza found a letter folded tight, worn at the edges. It was addressed to her in Matthew's handwriting, and the ink had bled a little from sweat, or rain or time. She didn't open it right away. For a while she just kept it on the mantel, resting against a jar of dried herbs. Then one night, with the fire low and Jonas snoring beside the hearth, she opened it. It was short, like everything Matthew ever said. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope I went standing beside you. I hope I earned that much. You don't owe me anything, Eliza, not your grief, not your kindness, but if you choose to stay, if you choose to live after, all I'll ask is that you let the land make you new, not gentler, just whole. She read it 3 times, then folded it back exactly the way she found it, and placed it in the drawer beneath her sewing kit. She never told him she read it. She didn't need to. They never married. No preacher, no papers, no promises spoken aloud. They didn't need a name for what they were because it was stronger than ceremony and steadier than vows. Their bond was forged through fire, silence, and the kind of trust that could only be built through survival. In the spring, when the frost melted and the soil cracked open like it was breathing again, Eliza gave birth to a son. No doctors, no midwives, just her and Matthew and the stubborn heartbeat of life, refusing to wait for permission. The boy was quiet, but his eyes were sharp and searching, like his mother's. He didn't cry much, but he noticed everything. As he grew, he learned to read the sky, to follow tracks, to hold a knife with care. He didn't grow up soft, and he didn't grow up scared. They taught him that fear was not a weakness, but a signal. You listen to it, learn from it, and keep moving anyway. Eliza taught him how to gut a rabbit before he turned 5. Matthew taught him how to shoot straight and ride. Together, they raised him not to be safe, but to be honest, to be strong, to be whole. He didn't ask many questions, until he was old enough to start wondering why there were no photographs on the wall, no visiting relatives, no neighbors close enough to bring pies. One day, he asked Eliza why they had no family but each other. She looked at him, her eyes steady and clear. "Because I earned the right to choose," she said, "and I chose your father. He listened when no one else did. That saved me more than any bullet." Sometimes she dreamed of Louis, the smell of the boarding house, the ache of Margot's cough in the walls, the bruises that marked her like a ledger of everything she'd endured. But when she woke, the dreams were just shadows. They didn't own her anymore. They had no power. She had made something real on this land, something that could not be taken away by men with guns or fists or papers. A legacy built from grit, scars and choices made with a steady hand. The ranch stood tall now, not just as a place to live, but as a symbol of what it meant to fight for yourself and win, not with luck, not with rescue, but with your own hands and heart and fury. The wind still came every season, and the mountains never changed, but Eliza did. She walked the hills with her rifle slung across her back, her son beside her, and the dog limping faithfully behind. She showed the boy the stones that marked where they'd buried the dead, not to teach him vengeance, but to teach him memory. She told him, "We don't hide from what happened. We remember it, we learn from it, then we live anyway." In time, the house filled with quiet joy, harvests that didn't fail, nights where they laughed by the fire, moments where the past didn't intrude. But even in peace, she stayed ready. The rifle was always clean, the traps were always set, because she knew the world didn't forget women like her. It watched them, it waited, but it would not win, not this time, not ever again. Eliza was not someone's bride, she was not someone's property, she was a storm that learned to set, and the land, rough and ruthless and honest, had made her whole.